Sir, you're not going anywhere until I see that receipt. Stop right there.
Move. I paid. You don't get to detain me because you feel like it.
Drop the bag. Show me the receipt now.
I'm not required to. You have zero reason to stop me.
You're not free to go until I say you're free to go.
Say it again for the cameras because you're crossing the line.
Sir, you're not going anywhere until I see that receipt. Stop right there. The demand wasn't a request. It was a command barked across the polished tile floor of the Tech Haven entrance. It was the kind of tone used to startle a teenager shoplifting a candy bar, not to address a 54-year-old man in a bespoke charcoal suit. Marcus Thorne didn't break stride. He adjusted the grip on the bag in his left hand, a heavy, reinforced shopping bag containing a high-performance drive array and a secure laptop items, essential for the upcoming audit of a shell company in the Caymans, and continued toward the automatic doors. The California sun was already baking the asphalt outside, visible through the glass, promising a heat that would punish anyone standing still. "Sir, I am talking to you." The loss prevention employee, a man in a yellow polo shirt that strained against a midsection built on fast food and inactivity, stepped directly into Marcus's path. He extended a hand, palm up, fingers wiggling expectantly. "Receipt, now, store policy." Marcus stopped. He didn't sigh, though the temptation was there. He stood 6'2", his posture honed by years of federal service and the discipline required to stare down cartel accountants and money launderers who had dissolved people in acid for less than what Marcus knew about them. He looked at the employee whose name tag read Gary over the rim of his glasses. "Gary," Marcus said, his voice a deep resonant baritone that carried without shouting. "I have purchased these items. They are now my property. I am leaving the store. I do not consent to a search of my personal property, and I am not showing you my receipt. Please step aside." "You can't leave," Gary sputtered, blinking rapidly. He hadn't expected the calm refusal. He expected compliance or a run for it. "It's policy. Check the sign on the door. We check all receipts." "Policy is not law, Gary," Marcus replied, sidestepping him smoothly. "And unless you have probable cause to believe I've committed a crime, which you don't, as I paid at Register 4 with a cashier named Sarah not 3 minutes ago, you are dangerously close to committing false imprisonment. Have a good afternoon." Marcus moved to walk past, but Gary was panicking. He looked over Marcus's shoulder and saw exactly what he needed. "Officer! Officer, help! He's refusing to stop. He's trying to walk out with merchandise." Marcus paused and closed his eyes for a brief second. He knew that specific vibration in the air, the shift from a retail annoyance to a potentially life-altering encounter. He turned slowly. Walking toward them from the vestibule was a uniformed police officer. He was young, perhaps late 20s, with the freshly pressed uniform and the aggressive gait of someone who spent too much time looking for a fight and not enough time learning the community. His nameplate read Braden. He had his thumbs hooked into his duty belt resting near his equipment, his eyes locked on Marcus with a predator's focus. "Is there a problem here, folks?" Braden asked, though he wasn't looking at Gary. He was sizing up Marcus, taking in the suit, the expensive watch, and the large bag. In Braden's eyes, Marcus saw the calculation happening, the bias kicking in, overriding logic. A black man, a high-value bag, a refusal to comply. In Braden's mind, the narrative was already written. "He won't show the receipt, officer," Gary said, emboldened now. "He's trying to push past me with a bag full of electronics." Officer Braden stepped into Marcus's personal space, violating the reactionary gap standard taught in every academy, an intimidation tactic that Marcus had seen 1,000 times. "Drop the bag, sir," Braden said. It wasn't a question. "And let's see that receipt." Marcus held the bag firm. "Officer, I am not required to show a receipt to leave a store. I have committed no crime. Unless you have articulable, reasonable suspicion that I have committed a theft, this conversation is over." I said. Braden's voice dropped an octave, trying to sound menacing. "Show me the receipt, or we're going to have a problem." Officer Kyle Braden was 29 years old and had been on the force for 4 years. He was the type of officer who believed that respect was something you demanded with a badge not earned with judgment. He saw the world in binary terms, sheep and wolves. And right now he was decided that the man in front of him, despite the nice suit, despite the calm demeanor, was a wolf trying to pull a fast one. "Sir, you need to lower your voice and listen to instructions," Braden said, though Marcus hadn't raised his voice a single decibel. It was a standard tactic accuse the subject of aggression to justify your own escalation. "My voice is level, Officer Braden," Marcus said, reading the nameplate intentionally. "I am simply asserting my Fourth Amendment rights. I have purchased this property. The transaction is concluded. I am free to go." "You're not free to go until I say you're free to go," Braden snapped. He moved his hand from his belt buckle to rest on the grip of his taser. The yellow plastic seemed to scream in the fluorescent lighting of the store entrance. Shoppers were stopping now. The flow of commerce had halted. A woman with a stroller backed away nervously. 2 teenagers near the kiosk pulled out their phones, the universal signal that things were about to get ugly. "Officer," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a tone that was almost professorial. "Let me be very clear so there is no misunderstanding. You are currently detained me. For a detention to be lawful, you must have reasonable suspicion based on specific and articulable facts that criminal activity is afoot. A refusal to show a receipt to a store greeter does not constitute reasonable suspicion. There is case law on this. Florida v. J.L. Terry versus Ohio. You are fishing." Braden's face reddened. He wasn't used to suspects citing Supreme Court cases. He was used to fear. He was used to people stammering excuses. This man's confidence felt like an insult. It felt like a threat. "I don't need a law lecture from a shoplifter," Braden sneered. "Gary here says you're stealing. That's my suspicion." "Gary said I refused to show a receipt," Marcus corrected. "Did you see me take anything without paying Gary?" Gary hesitated, looking between the looming officer and the stone-faced man in the suit. "Well, no. But why won't you just show it, if you have nothing to hide?" "Because in this country, citizens are not required to prove their innocence to authority figures on a whim." Marcus said, his eyes never leaving Braden's face. "We have rights, and I am exercising mine." Braden had heard enough. He stepped closer, his chest almost bumping Marcus. "I'm done asking. Give me your ID, now. We're going to run you and see what warrants pop up. Guys like you always have something." "Guys like me?" Marcus asked, a dangerous edge entering his voice for the first time. "And what kind of guy is that, officer?" "The kind that argues with police in a mall." Braden deflected, realizing he might have slipped. "ID, now. Failure to identify is a crime." "Only if I am lawfully arrested or detained for a valid crime," Marcus countered. "Which I am not. I am not providing identification. I am leaving." Marcus made to turn a slow, deliberate movement to show he wasn't fleeing, just ending the encounter. Braden reacted on instinct and anger. He grabbed Marcus's arm, his fingers digging into the expensive wool of the suit jacket. "Don't you walk away from me!" Braden shouted. Marcus froze. He looked down at the hand on his arm, then up at Braden's eyes. "Officer, remove your hand," Marcus said. The temperature in the entryway seemed to drop 10 degrees. "You are now committing battery. I strongly suggest you rethink your next move." The silence that followed Marcus's statement was heavy, thick with the tension of a stretched rubber band about to snap. The crowd had grown. There were at least 10 phones pointed at them now, little black rectangles capturing every pixel of Officer Braden's flushed face and Marcus Thorne's immovable resolve. "Battery." Braden let out a short, incredulous laugh. "I'm conducting an investigation. You're resisting." "I am not resisting." Marcus said, holding his hands slightly out to his sides, the shopping bag still firmly gripped in his left hand. I am standing still. I am verbally asserting my rights. You grabbed me. That is a seizure. And since you still haven't articulated a crime, it is an unlawful one. Braden released the arm but didn't back down. He couldn't, not with the audience watching, not with Gary. The loss prevention guy looking at him like he was the only thing standing between order and chaos. His ego was in the driver's seat now, and it had a lead foot. You want to play lawyer, fine. Braden spat. Put the bag on the floor. Hands behind your back. I'm detaining you for investigation of grand larceny. Based on what evidence? Marcus asked. He didn't move to comply. A hunch, a bias. You need more than that to detain someone for a felony. I have a witness. Braden pointed a shaking finger at Gary. You have a store employee who is annoyed I didn't follow a voluntary policy. Marcus corrected. Officer, look at me. Look at my demeanor. Look at the situation. You are making a mistake that is going to cost you more than just your afternoon. I am giving you an off-ramp here. Let me walk to my car and we can pretend this didn't happen. You threatening me? Braden's hand went back to his taser, unsnapping the retention hood. The click was audible. I am educating you, Marcus said. I'm trying to save your career. Get on the ground! Braden yelled, his voice cracking. The escalation was irrational, fueled by adrenaline and the terrified realization that he was losing control of the interaction. Get on the ground now or you're going to get tased. The crowd gasped. He didn't do anything, a woman shouted from the back. He just bought a computer. I saw him in line. Back up! Braden screamed at the onlookers, waving his free hand while keeping his right hand on the taser grip. Everyone back the hell up. This is a police operation. He turned back to Marcus, who hadn't flinched. Marcus stood like a statue, his expression one of profound disappointment. Ma'am, Marcus called out to the woman who had shouted without taking his eyes off Braden. Thank you. Please keep recording. Do not stop. Last chance. Braden pulled the taser from its holster. The red laser dot danced on Marcus's chest right over the silk tie. On the ground. I will not get on the ground, Marcus said calmly. I am 74 inches tall and I have bad knees. Moreover, I will not submit to an unlawful order. If you deploy that weapon, you will be using excessive force on a non-violent, non-threatening subject who is passively resisting an unlawful arrest. That is a clear violation of the Fourth Amendment and department policy. Braden hesitated. The taser felt heavy in his hand. The man wasn't screaming. He wasn't fighting. He was just speaking. But the words felt like punches. Braden holstered the taser, realizing that shooting an old guy in a suit might look bad on the news. Instead, he reached for his handcuffs. Fine. We'll do it the hard way. Braden lunged forward, grabbing Marcus's wrist and twisting it behind his back with force that was entirely unnecessary. Ow! Marcus said a flat statement of fact as his shoulder joint was torqued. You are hurting me. I am not resisting. Stop fighting. Up! Braden yelled for the cameras despite Marcus standing perfectly still. Stop resisting. I am not resisting. Marcus repeated, his voice tight with pain but controlled. He dropped the shopping bag. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. The bag contains delicate electronics. If they are damaged, you will be liable for that as well. Shut up. Braden slammed Marcus against the glass wall of the vestibule. The impact rattled the automatic doors. He wrenched Marcus's other arm back. The cold steel of the handcuffs bit into Marcus's wrists. Braden ratcheted them tight, too tight. You're under arrest. Braden panted close to Marcus's ear. Disorderly conduct, obstruction of justice, and resisting arrest. You cannot have resisting arrest without a valid underlying arrest, Marcus whispered. But you'll learn that in court. Braden spun Marcus around. Walk. He shoved Marcus toward the exit. The crowd had formed a semicircle outside. There were phones everywhere. People were angry. "Why are you arresting him?" a man in a construction vest yelled. "He showed you he paid." "Back off!" Braden shouted, his face slick with sweat. He was marching Marcus toward his patrol car parked in the fire lane. Marcus walked with dignity despite his hands being bound behind him. He kept his head up. He looked at the cameras. "My name is Marcus Thorne," he said loud enough for the phones to pick up. "I am being arrested by Officer Braden of the City Police Department for refusing to show a receipt. I have committed no crime. I am a calm, compliant citizen." "I said shut your mouth." Braden opened the back door of his cruiser and pushed Marcus inside. He didn't watch Marcus's head. Marcus had to duck quickly to avoid slamming his skull against the door frame. Braden slammed the door shut, cutting off the noise of the crowd. He stood there for a moment, breathing hard, hands on his knees. He felt a surge of triumph. He had won. He had taken control. The guy in the suit thought he was special, but nobody was special when they were in the back of a cage. Braden walked around to the driver's seat and got in. He didn't look at Marcus. He started the engine and peeled away from the curb sirens, blipping once to clear the pedestrians who were slow to move. "Before we see what happens on the ride to the station, I have a question for you all. Have you ever been in a situation where someone with a little bit of power tried to bully you just because they could? Did you fight back or stay quiet? Let me know in the comments." In the back seat, Marcus shifted his weight. The cuffs were cutting off his circulation. The hard plastic seat was digging into his spine. But his mind was clear. He was already drafting the affidavit. He was listing the witnesses. He was calculating the settlement. He looked at the back of Braden's head. The officer was adjusting his rearview mirror, looking at his own eyes, checking his reflection. He looked wired. "You have the right to remain silent," Braden recited quickly, almost as an afterthought, as they merged onto the main road. "Anything you say can and will be used against you." Marcus listened to the Miranda warning. It was the only part of the procedure Braden had gotten right so far. "Do you understand these rights?" Braden asked, eyeing Marcus in the mirror. Marcus said nothing. He stared straight ahead. "I asked if you understood," Braden said louder. Silence. "Fine. Be a mute. See if that helps you with the judge." Marcus wasn't being mute to be difficult. He was being mute because he was a professional. He knew that anything he said could be twisted. He knew that the time for talking was over. The time for evidence was now, and the biggest piece of evidence was currently driving the car. The drive to the precinct took 20 minutes. For Officer Braden, it was a victory lap. He had the radio on low, listening to the chatter of dispatch, feeling the adrenaline slowly taper off into a smug satisfaction. He occasionally glanced in the rearview mirror, hoping to see the man in the suit looking scared or pleading for a break. But Marcus Thorne was a void in the back seat. He sat perfectly upright, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He was practicing a technique he had learned 20 years ago during a joint task force operation, tactical dissociation. He wasn't in the back of a police car. He was in a workspace analyzing data. Violation 1, Marcus cataloged mentally. Failure to double-lock handcuffs. I can feel them tightening with every bump in the road. That's a policy violation and a tort claim for nerve damage. Violation 2, he noted as Braden took a corner too sharp, sending Marcus sliding across the plastic seat because Braden hadn't buckled him in. Failure to secure a prisoner. Negligence. Violation 3, Marcus thought as he listened to Braden muttering to himself. Think you're some big shot. Show me a receipt. Simple stuff. Prejudicial conduct. The officer is verbalizing his bias. Marcus thought about his ID in his back pocket. It was in a slim leather wallet separate from his cash clip. It contained his badge, a gold shield with the Department of the Treasury seal, and his commission book signed by the Secretary of the Treasury. He was a GS-14 special agent, a criminal investigator. He had the authority to investigate financial crimes, money laundering, and tax evasion at the highest levels. He carried a Glock 19 currently locked in the biometric safe in the trunk of his own car back at the mall. He had arrested people who owned private islands. He had stared down cartel bosses in interrogation rooms in El Paso. And now he was being lectured by a 29-year-old patrolman who probably didn't know the difference between a 1040 and a W-2. You know, Braden said, breaking the silence again, needing to fill the void. If you had just shown the receipt, you'd be home right now, playing with your new computer. Now you're going to spend the night in holding. Maybe get arraigned Monday. Hope you didn't have plans. Marcus remained silent. He focused on his breathing. Inhale for 4, hold for 4. Exhale for 4. What do you do anyway? Braden asked, looking for a hook. You dress like a lawyer. You a lawyer. That why you think you know the law? Silence. Cat got your tongue, or you just realizing how stupid you were? Braden laughed to himself. He picked up his radio mic. Dispatch Unit 4 Alpha. En route to station with 1 male in custody. Code 4. 10-4-4 Alpha. The dispatcher crackled back. Marcus allowed himself a tiny, imperceptible smile. Code 4. No further assistance needed. That was the biggest lie of the day. Braden was going to need a lot of assistance. He was going to need a union rep, a lawyer, and a new job. The cruiser pulled into the precinct Sally Port. The heavy metal gate rattled shut behind them. The lighting was stark industrial fluorescent. Braden got out and opened the back door. Let's go. End of the line. He grabbed Marcus by the arm again to pull him out. Marcus stepped out stiffly, his shoulders aching. Watch your head, Braden said mockingly, not shielding the door frame this time either. They walked into the booking area. The smell of stale coffee, floor wax, and misery hit Marcus. It was a smell he knew well, but usually he was on the other side of the counter. The booking room was a flurry of low-level activity. A drunk was singing in a holding cell. 2 officers were typing reports at a bank of computers. Behind the high desk sat Sergeant Miller, a man with graying hair and eyes that had seen everything and was impressed by none of it. He was 55, a year older than Marcus, and carried the weary weight of 30 years on the job. Braden marched Marcus up to the counter. What do we have here, Kyle? Sergeant Miller asked, not looking up from his paperwork. Refusal to comply, disorderly obstruction, Braden said, puffing his chest out. Guy wouldn't show a receipt at Tech Haven. Caused a scene. Resisted arrest. Miller looked up then. He saw Marcus. He saw the suit. He saw the demeanor. He frowned. Over a receipt? He was acting suspicious. Braden defended. Refused ID. I see, Miller said. He looked at Marcus. Name. Marcus stayed silent. He's playing the silent game, Sarge, Braden said. Real tough guy. Sir, I need your name for booking, Miller said, his voice calmer, more professional than Braden's. Marcus finally spoke. I will provide my identification when my property is inventoried, Sergeant. Miller nodded. Fair enough. Empty your pockets. Everything on the counter. Braden uncuffed one of Marcus's hands. Marcus slowly reached into his suit jacket. He pulled out a Mont Blanc pen, a pair of sunglasses. Then he reached into his back pocket and pulled out the slim leather wallet. He placed it on the counter. Miller picked up the wallet. He opened it to check for a driver's license. The movement of Miller's hands stopped abruptly. The room seemed to go quiet, as if the air had been sucked out of the ventilation system. Miller stared at the open wallet. On the left side was a holographic ID card. On the right, a heavy gold badge with blue enamel. United States Treasury. Special Agent, Criminal Investigation. Miller looked at the badge. Then he looked at Marcus. Then he looked at the badge again. He slowly closed the wallet, but kept his hand on it as if it were a live grenade. Kyle, Miller said. His voice was very quiet. Yeah, Sarge. Braden was busy filling out a property form, oblivious. Did you check his ID before you brought him in? He wouldn't give it to me. Said it was his rights or whatever. Miller closed his eyes. He took a deep breath. Kyle, come here. What? Braden walked over. Miller slid the wallet across the counter. Look. Braden looked down. What is that, a security guard badge? Read it, you idiot, Miller hissed. Braden squinted. United States. Treasury criminal. Investigator. He looked up at Marcus. Marcus was looking directly at him. The look wasn't angry. It was something far worse. It was professional pity. He's a Fed, Braden whispered. He's not just a Fed. Kyle, Miller said, his voice rising. He's an IRS criminal investigator. Do you know what they do? They take down mobs. They audit departments. They put politicians in prison. Miller turned to Marcus. He stood up straight. Agent Thorne, sir. Sergeant. Marcus nodded. I'd like these handcuffs off. Now. Yes, sir. Immediately. Miller rushed around the desk. Keys, Kyle. Give me the keys. Braden fumbled for his keys, his hands suddenly shaking. I didn't know. He didn't tell me. He didn't have to tell you. Miller snapped, unlocking the cuffs. Marcus rubbed his wrists. There were deep red indentations where the metal had dug in. He rotated his shoulders. Thank you, Sergeant, Marcus said. I need my phone, and I need to speak to your watch commander. Lieutenant Freeman is in his office, Miller said. I'll get him. Sir, can I get you some water, coffee? I don't want coffee, Marcus said. I want to preserve the evidence. No one touches Officer Braden's body camera. No one touches the dash cam footage. If anything gets deleted, I will bring the full weight of the federal government down on this building. Is that clear? Crystal clear, sir, Miller said. He looked at Braden. Get in the break room, Kyle, and don't you dare touch your equipment. Braden looked like a ghost. He looked at Marcus one last time, realizing that the suspicious person he had bullied was about to dismantle his entire life. Lieutenant Freeman was a large man who usually projected an aura of absolute calm, but when he walked into the booking area 3 minutes later, he looked like a man walking to the gallows. He had already been briefed by Miller. Agent Thorne, Freeman said, extending a hand. Marcus didn't shake it. Freeman awkwardly lowered his hand. I am Lieutenant Freeman. I want to personally apologize for this misunderstanding. This wasn't a misunderstanding, Lieutenant, Marcus said. His voice echoed in the now silent booking room. This was an unlawful deprivation of rights under color of law. 18 U.S. Code Section 242, a federal crime. Freeman winced. Sir, Officer Braden is young. He made a judgment call. He made a biased call. Marcus cut him off. He detained me without reasonable suspicion. He arrested me for asserting my Fourth Amendment rights. He used excessive force. He failed to secure me in the vehicle. And he verbally harassed me based on my race. Marcus pulled out his phone. I am calling my special agent in charge. Then I am calling the U.S. attorney for this district. I suggest you call your chief and your city attorney. Agent Thorne, please, Freeman pleaded. Can we discuss this in my office? We can drop all charges immediately. We can expunge the arrest record right now. There's no need to make this a federal case. It already is a federal case, Marcus said, tapping the screen of his phone. Because I am a federal agent who was kidnapped by your officer. But it's not about me. It's about the guy who comes in here next week who isn't a federal agent. The guy who works at the grocery store. The guy who doesn't know case law. What happens to him? Freeman didn't have an answer. Officer Braden is a liability, Marcus continued. I saw it in his eyes. I saw it in his tactics. This wasn't his first time. It was just the first time he got caught by someone who could bite back. We will investigate, Freeman promised. Internal affairs. I will be filing a formal complaint, Marcus said, and a lawsuit. But right now I am leaving. I want a copy of the incident report, the booking sheet, and the property inventory. I want them now." "Of course," Freeman said. He turned to Miller. "Print everything. Now." Marcus made his call. He stood in the middle of the booking room, surrounded by nervous officers. "SAC Johnson. It's Thorne. Yes, I'm fine. I'm at the 4th Precinct. I need you to send a team over." "No, I've been arrested. False arrest." "Yes. The officer is... well, he's about to have a very bad year." Marcus looked over at the break room door. Through the small window, he could see Braden sitting at a table, head in his hands. "And Johnson," Marcus said into the phone, "send the Civil Rights Division liaison. We're going to need to look at this department's stop and ID stats. All of them." Freeman went pale. An IRS audit was bad. A DOJ civil rights investigation was a death sentence for a department's administration. The fallout was swift, public, and devastating. The video from the woman in the parking lot hit social media before Marcus had even left the station. By the next morning, it had 4 million views. The hashtag #TechHavenArrest was trending globally. The image of Marcus Thorne, dignified, calm, suited, being shoved against the glass by a screaming, red-faced officer Braden, was the perfect visual representation of police overreach. But the real damage happened in the courtroom. Marcus's lawsuit didn't just target Braden. It targeted the city's training policies and the store's collusion with the police. The discovery phase was brutal. Marcus's lawyers working pro bono because Marcus donated the fees unearthed Braden's disciplinary file. There were 12 prior complaints. Excessive force, rudeness, racial profiling, all dismissed by supervisors as unfounded. Not this time. During the deposition, Marcus sat across from Braden. Braden looked smaller now, stripped of his uniform, wearing an ill-fitting suit. "Officer Braden," Marcus asked, acting as his own co-counsel, "can you articulate the specific crime I was committing when you detained me?" I thought you stole the computer," Braden mumbled. "Based on what facts? You looked like you didn't belong." "Because I was black?" "No, because you were resisting." "Asserting rights is not resisting, Mr. Braden," Marcus said softly. "It is citizenship." The city settled for $450,000 to avoid a jury trial that would have been a public relations massacre. As part of the settlement, the department was forced to rewrite its stop and identify policy and implement mandatory constitutional law training for all officers, taught ironically by a curriculum Marcus helped review. Kyle Braden was terminated. His certification was revoked by the state board, meaning he could never work as a police officer in the state again. The last Marcus heard Braden was working in a warehouse checking packing slips. A bitter irony that wasn't lost on anyone. Marcus took the $450,000 check and signed it over to the Legal Defense Fund and a local scholarship for law students from underrepresented communities. He didn't need the money. He needed the change. On a Tuesday afternoon 6 months later, Marcus walked back into Tech Haven. The new security guard nodded politely at him. "Good afternoon, sir," the guard said. "Good afternoon," Marcus replied. He bought a new hard drive. He walked to the exit. "Have a good day, sir," the greeter said, not asking for a receipt. "You too," Marcus said. He walked out into the sun. The air felt cleaner. The weight of the handcuffs was a memory, but the lesson remained. Freedom wasn't free. It was something you had to fight for, stand for, and sometimes be arrested for. Marcus got into his car, checked his reflection in the mirror, still the same calm, determined face, and drove away. He had work to do. There were still plenty of bullies in the world, and he had a badge to catch them. Conclusion. It's easy to watch a story like this and cheer for the victory. It feels good to see the bully get taken down, to see the bad cop lose his job, and the good guy win. But we have to remember something important. Marcus Thorne won because he was exceptional. He won because he was a federal agent, because he knew the law better than the officer, and because he had the resources to fight. What if he had been a 19-year-old student? What if he had been a construction worker with a prior record? What if he had been someone who got scared and ran? The outcome would have been very different. That is the tragedy hidden inside the victory. Justice shouldn't require a federal badge. It should be the default. This story is a reminder that knowing your rights is your first line of defense, but also that we have a long way to go before the system works for everyone, not just those who can fight back. What would you have done in Marcus's shoes? Would you have shown the receipt just to get home, or would you have stood your ground? And do you think the settlement was enough? Drop a comment below. I read every single one. If you believe in holding power accountable, hit that subscribe button. We have more stories coming that you won't want to miss. Stay safe out there.
Sir, you don't belong here. Get up and leave right now.
I'm a paying customer. You're judging me by my skin, not my actions.
That desk cost 12 grand. Don't lie to me.
You just crossed into illegal discrimination.
Good. I'm calling the police.
Sir, you don't belong here, and if you don't leave, I'm going to make you leave. Those were the first words Kyle Vance spoke to the man sitting at the mahogany executive desk. Kyle didn't ask if the man needed assistance. He didn't ask if he was looking for a specific model. He simply saw a black man in a high-end furniture showroom in downtown Chicago sitting at a desk that cost more than a Honda Civic and made a decision. It was a decision based on bias fueled by arrogance, and it was the single worst decision of Kyle Vance's 28 years of life. Because the man sitting at that desk running his hand along the grain of the imported wood wasn't just a customer. He was Marcus Thorne. And Marcus Thorne was the state attorney general. Thorne didn't look up immediately. He continued to inspect the joinery of the drawer, his face a mask of calm. He was 56 years old, a man who had spent 3 decades in courtrooms, first as a ferocious prosecutor, then as a defense attorney, and finally as the highest elected law enforcement official in the state. He wore a charcoal suit that was tailored on Savile Row, though Kyle Vance, with his off-the-rack polyester blend and scuffed loafers, wouldn't know quality if it hit him in the face. Vance only saw skin color. He saw a threat to the aesthetic of his showroom. "I'm speaking to you," Vance said, his voice rising. He was the store manager, a title he wore like a crown. He stepped closer, invading Thorne's personal space. "This is a private showroom for serious clientele. We don't allow loitering." Thorne finally raised his eyes. They were heavy-lidded, sharp, and possessed the kind of weight that usually made defendants reconsider their plea deals. "I am testing the merchandise." Thorne said, his voice a deep, resonant baritone. "I'm in the market for a new desk for my home study. This particular piece has excellent craftsmanship." "It's $12,000. Vance sneered, crossing his arms over his chest. He looked around the empty store, checking to see if his 2 sales associates were watching his display of authority. "And I don't think you have $12,000 to spend on furniture today, so I'm going to ask you one time to get up and walk out that door before I have to get security involved." Thorne leaned back in the leather chair, clasping his hands over his stomach. He had dealt with death row inmates, cartel leaders, and corrupt senators. A 20-something manager with a bad haircut and a worse attitude was barely a blip on his radar. But Thorne also knew that this wasn't just about him. It was about what happened to men who looked like him when they didn't have a badge or a title to protect them. "You're making an assumption based on my appearance," Thorne said calmly. "That is a dangerous game to play, young man. I have money. I have intent to purchase. By asking me to leave based on nothing but your own prejudice, you are treading into dangerous legal territory." Vance laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Legal territory? Listen to you. You think because you use big words I'm going to be intimidated, I have the right to refuse service to anyone. And I'm refusing it to you. Get out." Thorne didn't move. He didn't flinch. He simply checked his watch. Refusal of service must be based on conduct, not identity. I haven't raised my voice. I haven't damaged property. I haven't threatened anyone. Your refusal is arbitrary and discriminatory. I suggest you reconsider." Vance's face turned a shade of blotchy red. He wasn't used to being challenged, certainly not by someone he deemed beneath him. He pulled his phone from his pocket. "Okay, have it your way. I'm calling the police, and when they get here you're going to jail for trespassing." "By all means," Thorne said, gesturing toward the phone. "Make the call, but be very careful what you say to the dispatcher. False reporting is a crime." Vance didn't heed the warning. He dialed 911, his eyes locked on Thorne with a look of pure malice. He wanted a scene. He wanted to see this man humbled. He had no idea that he was lighting a fuse that would blow up his entire world. Kyle Vance walked toward the front of the store, putting distance between himself and Thorne, but making sure he was still loud enough to be heard. He held the phone to his ear, his posture stiff with self-righteous indignation. Thorne remained seated at the desk, pulling out his own mobile device. He wasn't recording videos. He was sending a text message to his chief of staff potential situation at Sterling Collection 4th Avenue, documenting timeline. Do not intervene yet. "Yes, emergency," Vance said into the phone, his voice pitching up an octave to feign distress. "I'm at the Sterling Collection Furniture Gallery. I have a man here who is refusing to leave. He's being belligerent. He's threatening my staff." Thorne raised an eyebrow, but remained silent. He looked over at the two sales associates standing near the fabric swatches. Both were women in their 40s. They looked uncomfortable, shifting their weight, avoiding eye contact with both their manager and the customer. They knew Thorne hadn't threatened anyone. They knew this was wrong. But they also knew Vance was petty and vindictive, so they stayed silent. "He's a black male, large build, maybe 60s. Vance continued, painting a picture of a physical threat. "He's sitting at one of the desks and refusing to get up. I've asked him to leave 5 times. I'm afraid he might become violent. Please send officers immediately." Vance hung up the phone and turned back to Thorne with a smug grin. "They're on their way. 5 minutes. You have 5 minutes to save yourself a criminal record." "You just committed a Class A misdemeanor," Thorne said, his voice flat and factual. "Filing a false police report. You told the dispatcher I was threatening your staff. We both know that is a lie. The recording of that call is now evidence." "It's your word against mine," Vance scoffed. "And who do you think they're going to believe, the manager of a high-end store or the guy who won't leave?" "That is the unfortunate reality of our system," Thorne admitted. "They will likely believe you, initially, but evidence has a way of surfacing." At that moment, the bell above the door chimed. A middle-aged white couple walked in looking for sofas. They stopped immediately, sensing the tension in the room. They saw Thorne sitting calmly at the desk and Vance standing over him with a flushed face. The woman in the couple, noticing Vance's aggressive stance, slowly reached into her purse and pulled out her smartphone. She held it low near her waist, but the camera lens was pointed directly at the interaction. Thorne noticed it. He gave a nearly imperceptible nod. The court of public opinion was now in session. "You're still here," Vance barked, playing to an audience he didn't realize was turning against him. "I told you this is a private business. We operate by appointment only for high-value items. The sign on your door says, 'Walk-ins welcome,'" Thorne noted. "And the door was unlocked. There is no signage indicating appointment requirements. You are fabricating policies on the fly to justify exclusion." "I don't need to explain my policies to you," Vance shouted. "Actually, you do," Thorne replied. "Under the Civil Rights Act of 1964, places of public accommodation cannot discriminate based on race. By creating arbitrary barriers for me that you did not apply to the couple who just entered, you are in direct violation of federal law." Vance looked at the couple who were standing frozen near the entrance. "Folks, I'll be with you in a moment. I'm just dealing with a trespasser." "He doesn't look like a trespasser," the husband said, his voice tentative. "He looks like he's shopping." "Sir, please don't interfere," Vance snapped. "This is a security matter." Thorne remained perfectly still. He placed his hands on the desk palms flat and visible. He knew exactly what was coming. He knew the police protocol for a belligerent trespasser call. They would come in hot. They would be adrenaline dumped. They would see a black man in a suit and see a threat, not a dignitary. He needed to be physically non-threatening while remaining legally immovable. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. They cut through the afternoon traffic, a sound Thorne had heard thousands of times. Usually he was on the side of the people in those cars. Today he was the target. 2 uniformed officers entered the store with a rush of tactical energy. The first was Officer Miller, a man in his early 30s with a buzz cut and a look of intense irritation. He had his hand resting near his holster. Trailing him was Officer Higgins, older, heavier, looking more tired than aggressive. But Miller was the lead, and Miller was looking for a fight. "Who called?" Miller demanded, his eyes scanning the room. "I did," Vance said, stepping forward, instantly transforming his demeanor from bully to victim. "Thank God you're here. He's right there. He refuses to leave. I've asked him 10 times. He's scaring my other customers." Miller turned his gaze toward Thorne. He didn't see the bespoke suit. He didn't see the calm demeanor. He saw a suspect. He marched over to the desk, closing the distance aggressively. "Sir, stand up," Miller commanded. Thorne didn't move. He kept his hands flat on the desk. "Officer, I am a customer in this store. I have not committed any crime. This manager is refusing service based on my race, which is a civil rights violation. I am waiting for him to process my purchase or provide a lawful reason for my removal." "I don't care about your purchase," Miller snapped. "The owner of the property wants you gone. That means you leave. Now stand up." "I am not trespassing," Thorne said, his voice steady. "To be trespassing, I must be unlawfully on the premises. I entered legally during business hours. His revocation of consent is based on an illegal premise, racial discrimination. Therefore, his order to leave is unlawful, and I am not obligated to comply with an unlawful order." Miller's face hardened. He wasn't used to suspects citing case law. He interpreted the intelligence as insolence. "I'm not going to argue the law with you. You're trespassing. Stand up or I will remove you." "Officer," Thorne said, looking Miller directly in the eyes, "I am asking you to de-escalate. I am asking you to speak to the witnesses. Speak to the couple by the door. Ask them if I have been belligerent. Ask them if I have threatened anyone. You are operating on the word of a man who lied to your dispatcher." "Sir, stand up," Miller shouted, reaching for his handcuffs. "You are under arrest for criminal trespass and obstruction." "On what grounds is the obstruction?" Thorne asked. "I am sitting. I am not resisting. I am speaking. Speech is not obstruction." "You are refusing a lawful order," Miller said. He moved around the desk. He grabbed Thorne's left arm and yanked it. Thorne didn't pull back. He allowed his arm to be moved, but he didn't help. He went limp, a passive resistance technique he had seen used in protests for decades. "I am not resisting," Thorne stated clearly for the camera he knew was recording from the doorway. "I am complying with your physical force, but I do not consent to this search or seizure. You are violating my Fourth Amendment rights." "Stop talking," Miller grunted, twisting Thorne's arm behind his back with unnecessary force. He shoved Thorne's face toward the polished wood of the desk. "Give me your other hand." Officer Higgins stepped in nervously. "Miller, maybe we should just ID him first. He's pretty well-dressed man." "He's a trespasser who thinks he's a lawyer," Miller spat. "Cuff him." Thorne allowed his right hand to be pulled back. The cold steel of the handcuffs clicked shut on his wrists. The sound was sharp in the quiet store. The couple by the door were gasping. The woman was filming her hand shaking. "You are making a mistake," Thorne said quietly. "A mistake that will cost this city dearly." Yeah, tell it to the judge," Miller said, hauling Thorne up from the chair. Thorne almost smiled. I am the one who appoints the judges, he thought. But he said nothing. He let them handle him. He let them push him toward the door. He wanted every second of this recorded. He wanted the indignity to be absolute so the vindication could be total. The walk from the desk to the patrol car was only about 50 feet, but it felt like a mile. Miller gripped Thorne's bicep with bruising force, parading him past the expensive leather sectionals and the imported rugs. Kyle Vance watched with a look of triumph crossing his arms and shaking his head as if he were the one who had been wronged. That's what happens, Vance muttered as they passed. Trash. Thorne caught the word. He filed it away. It would look excellent in the deposition. They burst out of the cool air-conditioned store into the bright Chicago sunlight. The sidewalk was busy. People stopped. They saw 2 white police officers escorting a distinguished black man in handcuffs. Phones came out. The court of public opinion was expanding its jury pool. Officer, Thorne said as they reached the car. My wallet is in my inside jacket pocket. It contains my identification. I strongly suggest you check it before you place me in that vehicle. We'll check it at the station, Miller said, opening the back door of the cruiser. Watch your head. He pushed Thorne down into the hard plastic seat. The space was cramped. The handcuffs bit into Thorne's wrists. The door slammed shut, sealing him in the smell of stale sweat and industrial cleaner. Thorne shifted to get as comfortable as possible. He closed his eyes for a moment, controlling his breathing. His heart rate was elevated. He was human after all, but his mind was cold, calculating steel. In the front seat, Miller and Higgins got in. Miller was pumped up, breathing hard. Guy thinks he can just talk his way out of anything. I know the law. I hate that type. Higgins looked in the rearview mirror at Thorne. He was pretty calm, Miller. And that suit, that's not a cheap suit. Maybe we should have run his name. He wouldn't give it. Miller lied to himself. He was obstructing. We'll print him, book him, kick him loose in 4 hours. Standard trespass. Miller started the engine. Dispatch, we're 10 to 15 with 1 male subject, en route to the precinct. Thorne sat in the back listening. He knew the precinct they were heading to, the 12th district. He knew the captain there. He knew the layout of the holding cells. He had toured that facility 3 months ago to announce a new grant for community policing. The irony was palpable. The drive took 15 minutes. Thorne used the time to memorize the officers' names from their display on the dashboard computer, which was partially visible through the grate. Officer J. Miller. Officer P. Higgins. He memorized the time. He memorized the conversation they were having about lunch, completely oblivious to the radioactive material they were transporting in their back seat. When they pulled into the sally port of the police station, the heavy garage doors rolled down, shutting out the light. Thorne was pulled out of the car. His legs were stiff. Miller did a quick pat-down, his hands moving roughly over the expensive fabric of the suit. He found the wallet, but didn't open it. He just shoved it into an evidence bag he was holding. Let's go, Miller said. They walked him through the sterile concrete hallways. They passed a few other officers who looked up, saw a standard arrest, and looked back down. Bias was a funny thing. It made the extraordinary look mundane. They just saw another black man in cuffs. They didn't look closer. Until they reached the booking desk. The booking room was a flurry of activity. Phones ringing, radios, chatter, the clank of cell doors. Behind the high desk sat Sergeant Reynolds. Reynolds was an institution in the 12th District. He was 60 years old, black-tired and waiting for his pension. He had seen it all. He kept his head down, filling out paperwork as Miller and Higgins approached with their prisoner. Possession, Reynolds asked without looking up. Trespassing, Miller said, tossing the evidence bag containing Thorne's wallet onto the counter. Belligerent. Refused to leave a furniture store. Claimed he knew the law. Reynolds sighed. Name? Refused to give it, Miller said. We gotta run prints. Reynolds finally looked up. "All right, sir, step forward. I need you to—" Reynolds' voice died in his throat. The pen dropped from his hand and clattered onto the desk. He stood up slowly, his eyes widening until they looked like they might pop out of his head. He looked at Thorne. Then he looked at the wall behind him where a framed certificate of commendation for the precinct hung. The certificate was signed by the state attorney general. Reynolds looked back at Thorne. Thorne held his gaze, his expression stony. "Officer Miller," Reynolds whispered. His voice was trembling. "Yeah, Sarge." Miller was busy unclipped his radio, oblivious. "Do you know who this is?" Reynolds asked, his voice rising to a panic. "Some guy who wouldn't leave a furniture store," Miller said. Reynolds walked around the desk. He didn't walk, he rushed. He moved with a speed that defied his age. He went straight to Thorne. "Sir, Mr. Attorney General, I am so sorry." Miller froze. Higgins choked on the air he was breathing. The entire booking room went silent. The typist stopped typing. The other prisoners stopped talking. "Attorney General?" Miller stammered. He looked at the man in cuffs. He looked at the suit again. The realization hit him like a freight train. Reynolds was fumbling for his keys. "Get these off him. Miller, give me your keys. Now." Miller stood paralyzed, so Reynolds grabbed his own keys. His hand shook as he inserted the small key into the handcuffs on Thorne's wrists. The mechanism clicked. The cuffs fell away. Thorne brought his hands in front of him. He rubbed his wrists slowly, looking at the red marks left by the metal. He didn't speak immediately. He let the silence stretch. He let it become unbearable. He looked at Miller, who was now pale. His mouth slightly open, the color draining from his face as he realized his career was effectively over. Thorne turned his attention to Reynolds. "Sergeant Reynolds, good to see you again. I believe the last time we met was at the Policemen's Benevolent Association dinner." "Yes, sir. Yes, Mr. Attorney General," Reynolds said, sweating profusely. "Sir, there's been a terrible mistake." "A mistake implies an accident," Thorne said, his voice ice cold. "This was not an accident. This was a systematic failure of procedure judgment and basic constitutional adherence." Thorne reached out and picked up the evidence bag from the counter. He opened it and took out his wallet. He pulled out his badge, the gold shield of the Attorney General, and placed it on the counter with a heavy clack. "I want the Chief of Police here," Thorne said softly. "I want him here in 20 minutes, and I want the body camera footage from these two officers uploaded and secured immediately before anyone accidentally deletes it. Do I make myself clear?" "Crystal clear, sir," Reynolds said. "I'm calling the chief now." Thorne turned to Miller. The young officer looked like he wanted to vomit. "You have the right to remain silent," Thorne said to Miller. "I suggest you use it." The next hour was a blur of brass. The chief of police arrived in 14 minutes, breathless, his uniform hastily buttoned. He found Marcus Thorne sitting in the captain's office, not in a cell sipping a cup of coffee that Reynolds had personally fetched. But the atmosphere wasn't friendly. It was an inquisition. "General Thorne," the chief said, "I cannot express how deeply sorry I am. This is unacceptable." "It's not just unacceptable, Chief," Thorne said, standing up. "It's illegal, and it's commonplace. That's the problem. If I were a school teacher or a janitor or an accountant, I would still be in that cell. I would be facing charges. I would have an arrest record that would ruin my employment." "We will handle this internally," the chief promised. "Officer Miller will be suspended pending investigation." "No," Thorne said. "You won't handle this internally, because I am appointing a special prosecutor. My office cannot handle it due to the conflict of interest, so I am bringing in the DOJ. We are going to audit the stops and arrests of this precinct, and we are going to audit that furniture store." Thorne walked out of the station an hour later. He didn't sneak out the back. He walked out the front door. The media was already there. The video from the furniture store had gone viral. The woman who filmed it had uploaded it with the caption, Manager calls cops on black man for sitting. Cops arrest him. Turns out he's the Attorney General. It had 3 million views in 2 hours. Microphones were thrust in his face. Mr. Attorney General, Mr. Thorne, is it true you were arrested? Thorne stopped. He adjusted his cuffs. He looked directly into the cameras. Today I was reminded, he told the press, that in the eyes of some, my achievements, my title, and my service to this state mean nothing compared to the color of my skin. I was arrested for the crime of shopping, but this isn't about me. It's about every citizen who doesn't have a gold badge to pull out of their wallet when their rights are violated. We are going to fix this. While Thorne was speaking, corporate lawyers were descending on the Sterling collection. Kyle Vance was in the break room watching the news on his phone. He saw Thorne's face. He saw the title State Attorney General on the chyron. He felt the blood leave his head. The district manager walked in. He didn't even look at Vance. You're fired. Get your things. You have 5 minutes. But I followed policy, Vance stammered. You called the police on the Attorney General, Kyle. You destroyed this brand in an afternoon. Get out. Vance walked out of the store to find a news crew waiting for him. He tried to cover his face, but it was too late. He was the face of racism in Chicago. The fallout was swift, brutal, and necessary. Thorne didn't let up. He didn't accept the private apologies from the mayor or the governor. He filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against the city and the furniture company. The discovery phase of the lawsuit against the police department was damning. It revealed that Officer Miller had a history of contempt of cop arrests, arresting people who questioned his authority. It showed that the precinct had a pattern of arresting black men for trespassing in high-end areas at a rate 4 times higher than white suspects. The furniture store was worse. Their internal emails revealed a watch list policy that encouraged managers to remove urban youth and unqualified browsers to maintain the store's exclusive atmosphere. Kyle Vance had been following an unwritten rule that was rot at the core of the company. 6 months later, the settlement was announced. The furniture company, facing a total boycott and a stock price that had tanked by 40%, agreed to pay $4 million. They also agreed to mandatory bias training and a complete overhaul of their management. The city settled for an undisclosed amount, but the money wasn't the point. The point was the consent decree. The police department was forced to accept federal oversight. Officer Miller was fired and decertified. He would never be a cop again. Officer Higgins was suspended and retrained. Thorne stood at a podium to announce the resolution. He looked tired. The fight had taken a toll, but he held a check in his hand. This settlement, Thorne said, holding up the $4 million check from the furniture store, will not go to me. I don't need it. This money is starting the Thorne Legal Defense Fund. It will provide top-tier legal representation for indigent defendants who are wrongfully accused of trespassing and low-level offenses. It will fight for the people who can't fight for themselves. The room erupted in applause, but Thorne didn't smile. He looked solemn. That evening, Marcus Thorne sat in his home study. He was sitting at his new desk. He hadn't bought it from the Sterling collection. He had commissioned it from a local black carpenter. It was beautiful, sturdy, and honest. He sat in the silence of his home looking at the framed photo of his grandfather on the wall. His grandfather had been a sharecropper who wasn't allowed to walk on the sidewalk when a white man passed. 2 generations later, his grandson was the chief law enforcement officer of the state. And yet, it had taken only 5 minutes for a store manager and a police officer to strip all that away and reduce him to just a suspect. Thorne took a sip of scotch. He thought about Officer Miller's face when he realized who he had handcuffed. It was a look of fear, yes, but it was fear of consequences, not fear of the moral weight of his actions. That was the problem. They were sorry they got caught. They weren't sorry they did it. He realized that his victory was an anomaly. If he had been anyone else, he would have a criminal record right now. He would have a mugshot online. He would have lost his job. The system had worked for him only because he was the system. Thorne leaned forward, looking into the empty room, speaking to a ghost that wasn't there. We have so much work to do. Work. Have you ever been judged by your appearance in a place of business? Have you ever felt that sinking feeling when authority figures side with the wrong person? It's a heavy burden to carry, and not everyone has a badge to shield them. Drop a comment below if you think justice was served in this story. And if you believe that we need to hold our institutions to a higher standard, hit that subscribe button. We need to keep telling these stories until we don't have to anymore. Thank you for watching. Be safe out there and know your rights.